Hey everyone, and welcome to the interview series. And today I have with us Dr. David Niven, who is the author of 100 Simple Secrets of Happy People, and a lot of other books. And he's also a PhD. And yeah, is there anything else that you'd like to let the audience know about yourself, David?
I think that covers the highlights.
Okay, that's great. So, for yourself, you've written about happiness. How did you get into that? How did you start with writing about happiness?
Well, really, I was doing research. I was in the library at Ohio State, way down deep in the basement. And I was thinking about the fact that, there were just mountains and mountains of research reports down there about people's lives, about how to be satisfied with their lives, how to improve your lives. And nobody was ever going to come down to the basement of the Ohio State Psychology Library and read these reports. And even if they did do that, they'd find that these reports were written with jargon. They weren't written to be understood. They weren't written to be used. They were written, from one academic to another. And really, the potential of that information was for good, for helping people, was being wasted. And so what I really thought about was taking what we already knew and almost translating it into language and examples that people could really use in their lives, and essentially, unearthing all this stuff from the library and getting it out there into the real world.
Oh, that's great. And was there a particular moment where that just kind of sparked your desire to get that information out there, or was it
Well, I
just?
was I was down there working on a research paper of my own, and fully aware that if I did this research well, I could get it published, and it would be in an academic journal, and maybe upwards of 23 people might read it someday. And while I was working on that study, I thought about, what if you took what's down here, wrote it in a way that people could really use it, and make it something that you could get the information without sort of having to, you know, get the education, without having to immerse yourself in this and make it your field of study, but get the value of all this good research that people were doing. So
Ah,
while I was working on the academic side, I thought this is something that really needs to be done to really do some good for people with the information that's already there.
no, that's very generous and kind of you. And so, just curious, how does one measure happiness?
Well, there's an awful lot of ways. Most research, the simplest way is just asking people about their level of satisfaction. It's of course it's relative. Your scale is going to be different than anybody else's scale, but you can do a pretty good job of telling us if you feel miserable today, or if you feel okay, or if you're thrilled. So a lot of this research is based on your own reference points, and even just shaping those reference points can be a way to affect people's happiness. There's certainly a few indicators, behavior indicators that studies use, but the biggest effect is really just asking people to talk about their lives, and one of the things that's striking when you do that is your assumption about what's the ingredient of a happy life, just sort of absolutely off the top of your head. If I said to you, all right, I'm going to show you a rich person who lives in total comfort, and I'm going to show you a nomadic tribesman who lives in the absolute middle of nowhere, and tell me who's happy. We're just going to say, of course, the person who lives in opulence is happy, and the research finds that isn't actually true. That that the ingredients of a quality life have very little to do with the kind of superficial indicators of success, that we associate just off the top of our head with what's a happy life, what's a fairy tale ending look like.
Okay, yeah, no, that's really good. And well, speaking of money and I guess material items, so I noticed in the book money wasn't really mentioned,
Mhm.
and I know I maybe read or heard that I think it was Daniel Kahneman who said that you need the equivalent of about 70 to maybe $100,000 in income per year, depending on what your expenses are like or where you live in the world, in order to meet sort of a baseline happiness. And then afterwards, it kind of it's just a marginal increase. Is that true? I mean, do you need a certain amount of income in order to be happy?
Well, obviously, you need to be able to sustain a life. You need food and shelter. But our assumption that happiness just goes up with every dollar is absolutely absurd and nowhere near true. And one of the things that comes out in the 100 Simple Secrets of Happy People is the very first building block of happiness is your relationship with other people. Whether it's family relationships, friendships, marriage. These things are the building block of happiness beyond anything else, any other concern or consideration that you have. And I think the bottom line of research is that as long as you have enough, that you can sustain and survive a life, the influence of money is really way down the list of happiness indicators. And as I was saying a moment ago, the Maasai tribe of herdsmen are pound for pound happier than people who live in the wealthiest countries in the world. And there's a reason for that. They have the essentials of what their life requires. They have those relationships, and giving them $1 million wouldn't change that. And on the flip side of that, there's a lot of research. This is going to come as bad news for folks who like to play the lottery, but there's a lot of research out there that you take a person and you give them a winning lottery ticket, and you have not in any way ensured their future happiness. In point of fact, they're likely to be less happy 10 years after they win the lottery than before they won, simply because the money raised their expectations, but it didn't change their nature, and it didn't change their ability to, enjoy the things around them and to enjoy the people around them.
Oh wow, that is surprising. I can't
right, it goes
believe that.
against our basic assumptions that give whatever your life is, that plus a winning lottery ticket is inherently better. That's our assumption, and it's it's one of those things where it's just a natural assumption that you don't question. That me plus a promotion is happier me. Me plus more money is happier me. Me plus any of these kind of superficial things. Me plus a new car is happier me. Those are things that part of it is marketing. There's a lot of folks who have an interest in selling us that idea, and part of it is it's just a natural assumption. Why wouldn't it be that way? And so one of the things I was doing in writing that and the books afterward is to tell folks, but that's I could give you $1,000, and the effect of that on your happiness is going to be so tiny, so infinitesimal that in terms of raising your happiness, it wouldn't be worth doing. On the other hand, I could tell you that if you hold the door for somebody the next time you're going into a store, and just keep doing that for the rest of your life, that's going to vastly have a bigger effect on your happiness than the $1,000. But who would make that assumption?
Yeah, no, it's very interesting because one thing I noticed in a lot of books on happiness or regarding happiness, they all talk about doing. I guess it's in some sense it's more so production than consumption. That's where we derive happiness. We get a lot of happiness from doing things for other people. I guess we're innately social beings, and because we're innately social beings, we derive a lot of happiness from helping others or doing things for others, and that's very interesting.
Well, right, and the reason I use that holding the door open example is you don't have to be Mother Teresa. You don't have to go out and do the most amazing act of charity to feel that little bump of, hey, I am a good person. Literally, hold the door open for somebody. Challenge anybody to do this. Hold the door open for somebody. They say thank you. And what do you feel? You feel like, hey, I'm a good person. Look what I just did. And it's trivial. It's tiny. But those kinds of things help inform who we are. And so, part of what those kinds of things, those acts that you're talking about, what do they do? It's not just the physical act itself in the exchange. It's what it tells us about ourselves. And this is why folks who volunteer, and it literally doesn't matter what kind of volunteering you do. You do a little bit of volunteer work, and it has a tremendous effect on people's happiness because everything they do reminds them, hey, look at this, I'm a good person. I volunteer at the dog shelter or wherever it is. And it informs everything that you do. That feeling goes with you, whether you're, at work or whether you're at home or wherever you go. That feeling that you're a good person sticks with you.
Oh, that's wow. That's no, that's very counterintuitive to what to people think about happiness, and thank you for sharing that. So I know the book was written in 2006, and so for yourself, have you found any sort of new research on happiness that wasn't included in your book?
Well, I mean, you're right, and there's lots of great studies that have been done since then, and there's a lot more effort by different authors to try and kind of build on what I did of bringing the research to people, and that's all all for the good. I would say the main two things that you would say from the research then to now. I mean, one is the core findings haven't changed at all. The notion that the relationships, human connections are critical hasn't changed at all. The notion that you can do little things today, little tiny insignificant things that add to your happiness hasn't changed. One of the really big ones in my book and continues through today is so much of happiness is not what happens to us, it's how we respond, it's how we think about what happens to us. That kind of the assumption that, well, a happy person has good things happen to them and unhappy people have bad things happen. Well, no, that's absurd. Happy people get stuck in traffic, happy people have bad bosses, happy people have the same kinds of lives, they just respond to it differently. So all that's the same. What's different? What's the biggest difference? The way we spend our time and the effect of smartphones and constant internet access. That's the thing that's really changed dramatically since the book came out. And the modern research on that, again, it goes against the grain of how we like to live our lives, which is total connection isn't useful. That immersion in those thousands of Facebook relationships is not better than 3 close actual human living friends. I mean, that's really where the update would come in terms of balancing the very superficial rewards of your online life versus the much richer rewards of real life.
Now, having said that, do you think that social media is, in some sense, maybe making us unhappier? Because when you have example, Instagram, Twitter, you're on your feed and then you're looking at other people's posts and then you're seeing, this kind of perfected picture or this, this picture that took like 10 or 20 minutes to take. And then, we obviously take a lot of things for face value. So because we see all these pictures of these glamorous lives, do you think that's affecting our happiness in some way?
It's an absolutely real danger. And, you go back pre-social media and, you could be jealous of people, but your field of jealousy was limited, Okay, at work, all right, I'm jealous of the person who's got the bigger office. Okay, on my neighborhood, I'm jealous of the person who's got the newer car or the bigger house. But, your capacity to sort of see what another person's up to and on a daily basis was limited. And that's the real danger, as you suggested, that you get all the pictures of people on vacation, and you don't get pictures of them cleaning the bathroom, and all of a sudden their lives are perfect and yours aren't by comparison. And it's one of the things that I wrote about in the 100 Simple Secrets of Happy People, that real danger of competing with the neighbor who has the new car, competing for things that you don't actually want. It's okay, yes, the neighbor's got a newer, flashier car, but you don't actually want your neighbor's car. And, maybe somebody's got a bigger office, but, they're staying later than you. so I think social media just blows that up into your capacity to feel that every hour, every day about almost everybody. And yes, that's a real danger. So it's not just that it can consume time and have you do that instead of, core human relationships. It's that it sets you up for that comparison. That their lives are these curated works that belong in a museum, and your life is real. And of course, their life is real, and they're just not putting it all on parade for you.
Yeah, no, it's yeah, for sure. And for myself, I personally try to stay away from social media as much as possible. I use it, but I don't. I try not to get used by it. And so I noticed in your book, pretty much. I don't want to generalize, but from what it seems like in your book, there are three sort of main overarching themes where we derive happiness. And the first is, having meaningful relationships or social connections. The second would be just not really, I guess, keeping up with the Joneses, or not really caring about what others really think, and just kind of living your life on your own terms. And then the third thing is having a purpose, or having some sort of why to that you're achieving. Would you say that's more or less kind of the overarching? I know obviously you can't just generalize, but would you say that we derive our most happiness from maybe like those three things, or is there something else that I'm sort of missing?
Sure. I mean, those are huge pillars, and we touched on the importance of the relationships, and we were just talking about the comparison danger, and that third piece of it is to really, and it's connected to the others, but to really value what you value. That there's no upside in chasing things that other people are chasing. There's no upside in going after things simply because they're there, but there's tremendous upside in, it sounds very simplistic, but in valuing what you value, which is to say, if you desperately care about a subject, pursuing it, whether it's in your work life or in your personal life, whatever it is, value what you value, and not, you're not going for the promotion merely because it's there, but because there's some meaning to you, some absolute real purpose that you want to pursue with that. And so, part of all of that is minimizing distractions. So, instead of worrying what kind of car your neighbor has, realize how silly and superficial that is. Instead of going after some goal, because what's going to happen when you get the promotion? What's going to happen is you're going to want the next promotion. That there isn't actually a destination there if it isn't what you value. And so, I do come back to that point, and what it means for people is a tremendous amount of relief that you can stop chasing things that aren't really fundamental to who you are. And, we started out on the idea that it's not money. And, this is a perfect example of that, because let's say you make it your goal, all right, I want to make 20% more. Okay, fine. You make 20% more, you're going to want to make 20% more than that. It doesn't actually have an end point. Whereas having things that you truly value do have endpoints. You can accomplish them. You can feel them, and it's the essence of this is really for people to examine what they're going after and think about it, so that they don't waste their time chasing something that isn't fundamental to them, because that has two possible outcomes. One is they don't get it and they live frustrated by that fact. Second is they do get it and they live frustrated by the fact that it wasn't all that valuable to them in the first place.
That's very interesting. So it's pretty much the perception, or it's just kind of people chasing mirage in some sense with regards to happiness. They think that, oh, if I have this, it'll make me happier, and then when they get there, it's just kind of that mirage is getting pushed back. So no, that's a very good point. It's the idea of happiness for us is just very I guess it's been shaped a lot by the media.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, for yourself, what would you say, or what are three simple ways that people can increase their happiness just starting today?
Okay, sure. I mean, the first one we already mentioned, a simple kindness.
Okay.
I mean, as little as holding the door for the next person. Just a simple act of kindness in any context. Whether it's at home, whether it's at work, whether it's out in the world. A simple kindness. Just to drum home that point. I was in a convenience store once with my daughter. She was 2 at the time. I was holding her, walking in the door, and an older lady is walking in behind me, and I hold the door for her, and she says thank you, and everybody feels good. I feel good about the whole thing. And then my daughter and I are going through the store getting some snacks, and the lady, a couple minutes later, tracks us down and comes to the same part of the store, and she says, "That was so nice of you. Look at you. You're carrying your daughter, and you paused to hold the door open for me." And she just went on and on about how nice that was.
Yeah.
And it was seconds. It was seconds of effort, and yet it meant something to her, and it meant something to me, and I can still remember that conversation. So a little act of kindness doesn't matter. It's going to improve your outlook. All right. Second thing. Stop one thing that you're going to do by reflex. You go on social media every day. Well, don't go unless you have a purpose. You're going to watch TV, but you don't have anything in mind to watch. Don't do it. Stop one thing that you're doing by reflex that you don't actually have a specific value for. And it doesn't mean never do it, but don't just do it because you do it. Just stop for a moment. Is there something you'd rather be doing? Would you rather read a book? Would you rather be talking to a friend? Stop that reflex, the thing that you just keep doing over and over again, just to give yourself that chance. And third thing, this is ridiculously tiny, but it matters tremendously. When you're taking a walk, wherever you're going, you're walking to your car, you're walking into the store, wherever you're going. Look up instead of down. A lot of us have a tendency, we're focused on exactly where we're going, and it influences our outlook on life. And we're in the exact same place doing the exact same thing. One person looking down and one person looking up. The person who's looking up is happier because they're seeing things, because things are happening in their world, even though they're in the same place at the same time. And I'll throw in a bonus, fourth easy one. Just out of nowhere, smile at somebody. And I mean, this is one of those cause and effect things. I smile, you smile back, and next thing I know, somebody's smiling at me, and I feel better about it. Even though it's silly and it's tiny, it actually influences how we feel.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. With regards to looking up, do you mean literally looking up, or do you mean sort of just? Do you mean just more so? Stop and kind of like smell the roses, or just kind of savor the moment. Do you mean more so of that?
I mean it both literally and figuratively.
Oh, wow.
Okay. A person who's just zooming down the hallway, looking down, is getting a lot less out of the experience than a person who's looking up and actually seeing what's around them. And there's actual studies about this. Monitoring people walking down the sidewalk, and it has an effect on on our outlook. People are looking down, they're not having a particularly good time of it. There's not much down there but your shoes, and people who are looking up are having a richer experience about it, and it influences the entirety of what they're going through.
Yeah, is that also because I remember I think Harvard professor Amy Cuddy, she says that there's a brain-body connection, and she talks about how if you put yourself in a power pose, that you increase your happiness. Would that also be the reason why? Because you're making yourself smaller, you're looking down, and therefore you're kind of having a smaller pose, and therefore your happiness is sort of decreasing.
Absolutely, and there's the physical mental connection. Again, as simple as a smile, it influences how you feel. I mean, it seems kind of superficial and unimportant, but it influences how you feel. And I mean, one of the points of the 100 Simple Secrets of Happy People is that, these are some little things that you could do. You could do them right now. It's not all, well, I'm going to have to dedicate the next 50 years and change everything and stop doing everything I like. No, I mean, right now, today, hold the door open. Right now, today, look up. Right now, today, smile. These aren't going to set you back. They're not going to cost you any great effort or any, sacrifice anything that you care about. Life, a little easier, a little better. And they're going to, from those little things, they're going to affect you when you're in the midst of everything else.
Yeah, no, that's no, for sure. And just your thoughts on flow. So Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi wrote the book Flow, and he developed the concept of flow and how we derive happiness from that. From what you've researched, do you think getting that we should always try to get into a state of flow? Is this kind of I guess, does this go in line with what you say about just doing things that we value? So is getting into a state of flow with things that we appreciate or things that we enjoy doing? Would you recommend also to people trying to get into that zone?
Sure, and part of what he's writing about and some of the implications of what we're talking about is sorry about that.
It's okay.
Is that we tend to continue on. So when we're doing good things, we tend to build upon them. When we're doing non-productive things, we tend to build upon those. And so, that's why I emphasized to not reflexively, repeat things, not reflexively watch TV, not reflexively, get on social media or whatever it is that, we can perpetuate the negative flow as well. And, that's really what I'm talking about, that, that you examine that so that, so that you have a chance to, to make good decisions and not simply fall into patterns that aren't particularly productive for you.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's that's very surprising, but yeah, no, that's very interesting. And we're almost about finished, but just before we finish, so knowing what you know now, what if you could go back in time and tell yourself 3 things about happiness? I guess going back to your 20-year-old self, rather, what would those 3 things be that you would tell yourself?
Well, some of these things were things I suspected, that I didn't know the full evidence on, but I had some suspicions that the money thing was not the key to happiness and so forth. I think some of the things that we've talked about would have surprised me, the degree to which they're useful, the degree that these little kindnesses are useful. I saw volunteering or helping somebody then as a good obligation, as good socially, good morally, but I didn't necessarily appreciate but it also benefits the person who is doing the giving, that it also benefits the person doing the serving, and that it isn't simply, out of the social contract or a moral obligation, but that, you have something personally to gain from doing good for other people, would have certainly surprised me. I think that, my path in terms of doing research and doing this book was along the lines of doing things that I find useful, that, valuing what I value. So, I certainly would have encouraged myself to keep down that path in terms of, that's absolutely right. Don't accept that, a study that you write is going to be read by 23 people and leave it at that. Ask yourself, well, would there be a more useful way to put this information, out there in the world? Certainly, like a lot of people, there's certain things that I do, I like sports a lot that, on their surface, can be seen as irrational. And I think the research would say there's certain elements of this that are entirely rational, where sports can connect people to each other, connect you to your neighbor, connect you with your friends, that even though it's on its surface silly to stand there and shout and cheer for a basketball game, it actually can reinforce some of those positive qualities that we're talking about, which is feeling connected to each other. So, I think a lot of the lessons I would have taken would have been to reinforce things I was doing, and say, this really is the way that is a more useful path and a way that, can contribute to happiness.
Oh, that's great. And so yeah, that's pretty much the interview. And for yourself, what are you working on right now?
Well, I'm looking at, you know, another take on happiness and updating some of it along the lines of what we've talked about, you know, reflecting some of the more modern challenges and, you know, again, working in the vein of taking research and making it as absolutely easy for people to put into use today in their lives, you know, as possible.
Yeah, so maybe possibly another book to your collection, another 100 simple secrets of great fan. Well, I saw the list of books that you had, and it was great. But yeah, where can the audience connect with you if they would like to? Yeah, if they would like to
Sure.
connect with you.
DavidNiven.com can get you a little bit of information about me, and I'm not, you know, not huge on social media as reflecting our conversation here, but David Niven PhD on Twitter. Every once in a while, I'll send something out that way.
Awesome, and thank you very much for being here today. And I'm sure the audience appreciates it, and I really appreciate you being here today.
My pleasure, Ryan.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.